Russia no longer holds back. The threat of missile revanche over Europe. On August 5, 2025, the Russian Foreign Ministry made a statement that could have far-reaching consequences for the entire European security architecture. Moscow officially abandoned its previous self-restrictions on the deployment of medium and short-range missiles. This means that the Kremlin is regaining the right to create and deploy missile systems capable of hitting targets on the European continent in minutes. From Gorbachev to Putin, a 180-degree turn. When Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, INF, in 1987, it was a step towards de-escalation and mutual trust. Today, almost 40 years later, this balance has been completely destroyed. The United States withdrew from the treaty under Trump, but Russia maintained until the very end that it was observing a unilateral moratorium. Now it, too, has been lifted. What Moscow says and what it means. On the air of the propaganda program Bolshaya Igra, the Foreign Ministry's statement was accompanied by comments with frightening frankness. Viewers were told that Russia is officially lifting restrictions on Iskanders, Kalibrs, and hypersonic zircons. New missiles may be installed in Belarus, a step away from Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. The range of these systems covers all of Europe, including the British Isles. The United States is accused of deploying destabilizing missiles in Australia, the Philippines, and Germany, in Wiesbaden. All of this is presented as a reaction to the threat from the collective West and supposedly forced measures to restore the strategic balance. The reality behind the rhetoric. In essence, the Kremlin is once again resorting to old tactics. Mirror escalation, accompanied by aggressive rhetoric and vague threats. Under the guise of a symmetrical response to the U.S. actions, Russia legalizes its own offensive missile weapons, turns Belarus into a front line of pressure on NATO, raises the stakes in a game that Europe does not seem to want to play. It should be understood, this is not defense, but blackmail. By creating the image of a retaliatory measure, Moscow blurs the line between diplomacy and military coercion. And here we also understand for ourselves that technically we can very easily land on a ground chassis both our Kalibr missiles and, what is important, unlike the Americans, the hypersonic zircon missile. We can do this too. The Americans, without hiding, are already entering the final testing of a medium-range hypersonic complex. It is called the Dark Eagle, and in fact, they are going to combine them into so-called multi-sphere or multi-domain groups. When, relatively speaking, at long distances this is the Dark Eagle complex, then medium distances are just the Typhon, the Tomahawk missile at 2,500 kilometers, and already the short range is the new Prism missiles for the HIMARS complex. And these multi-element groups, some of the elements they deployed in Southeast Asia in the direction of China, these are the Philippines, and the second such group to cover the entire territory of Europe, including the European part of Russia. This is Wiesbaden, respectively. Such a group is being formed. Of course, we cannot react to this, and we are now lifting these restrictions. By the way, it is very important. Here, Oreshnik falls under medium-range missiles. Let me remind you, the President said that they have been launched into series production and will be put into service with the troops, including these complexes will be in Belarus, and this covers the whole of Europe, including the British Isles. Yes, this is a very serious statement, a very serious warning. So we are waiting for further steps from our side, and I would advise the West to wait for them with tension. Why Europe cannot stand aside. This is not just Russian domestic rhetoric. This is a signal to the West, addressed primarily to Europeans. Moscow is ready to blackmail with peace and missiles if its conditions are not accepted. Europe cannot afford the luxury of indifference. Any compromise with an aggressor armed with zircons on its western borders will be perceived not as a gesture of goodwill, but as weakness. The threat is not hypothetical. It is taking shape before our eyes.